Hey Defenders, welcome back. So in the previous videos, we automated the Elasticsearch, Kibana, FileBeat, and Wazuh Manager software install. And now I want to show you guys how to automate the Wazuh-Agent install, right? So say for example, you have a data center already stood up. We're going to deploy Wazuh after the fact. Well, you have all these servers already stood up, and now you need to install the Wazuh-Agent software on these servers and point it to our Wazuh Manager, right? And depending on the size of your environment, that could be a very cumbersome task if you're doing it manually, right? If you're having to manually log on to 100 servers and run this various commands to install the Wazuh-Agent, that can take a long time. And we at OpenSecure love automation. So stick around and I will show you guys how to automate the Wazuh-Agent install with one of my favorite open source tools, Ansible. So stick around and let's jump into it. But first, time for my shameless plug. If you want to learn more about our company, head on over to opensecure.co. If you would like to hire us for a project, select the Contact Us link in the description of this video. To see firsthand the power of open source, take advantage of our interactive demo. Select the demo link in the description of this video to start exploring. Now let's get back to the video. All right, and so Ansible is a open source software provisioning and configuration management tool that we can use to automate our Wazuh-Agent install. And what's great about this is we can do it remotely via using SSH. So we don't have to install like an Ansible agent on one of our servers to be able to communicate with our actual Ansible server, right? So, and if you guys are still trying to kind of picture that out, so we'll have our Ansible server here, right? So this will, and you'll get a little more familiar with it as we go through the install of Ansible, and then we'll actually have a Wazuh playbook is what they call it, that we will then push to, we'll say server 1, in this case agent 1, and then server 2 or agent 2. So what'll happen is Ansible will upload SSH keys to agent 1 and to agent 2. So Ansible will be able to say, hey, agent 1, run this command. Hey, agent 2, run this command, and that command being our Wazuh install. And Ansible will be able to do this remotely. So we'll only have to run the command from the Ansible server rather than logging on to agent 1, agent 2, agent 3, and so on, right? And then from there, the agents will will install the Wazuh-Agent software and point to our Wazuh Manager. So let's go ahead and jump into that. So first we need to install Ansible. And Wazuh actually has documentation detailing this, which is great. So I actually haven't used Ansible to deploy Wazuh. I use kind of a homegrown solution that my current employer implements, and so pushed it out that way. But there's no reason why, if your company currently doesn't have a auto deployment tool, this would be a good solution to that. So we can install Ansible pretty easily. So I'll go ahead and log on to my Ansible server. All right, and let's go ahead and start to configure this guy. All right, so we're logged on. Let me stop firewall D. Oh, and let me do install nano so I don't run into that problem. I finally remembered to do it before again. All right, so we got that installed. We'll install the EPEL release repo. So we have that guy, and then we'll just run a yum install Ansible. And I'm doing this on a CentOS box, CentOS 7. They have documentation for Debian or Ubuntu as well that you can follow. So depending on whatever your operating system of choice is, there's different documentation that you can follow. All right, so we got Ansible installed. So now what we need to do is generate a SSH key pair, right, for the Ansible server. So what we're going to do is go into the home directory of Ansible, which I'm already in. Yep. So I will then run this SSH keygen command to generate a key pair for us. So enter which file to save the key. That's fine. I'll use the default file of root.ssh /id_rsa. Passphrase, I'll just leave it empty and not do a passphrase. You could do a passphrase if you wanted to. That's just another layer of security that you can add. And all right, so we have that generated. Now we need to check the permissions of these keys. So let's go ahead and navigate into this directory and see what we have. So we have our ID_RSA and ID_RSA.pub. So if we look at these guys, right, we'll see our private key, and then we see our public key. And let's go ahead and change the permissions. Let's have restricted permissions 600 or read write. So let's check that. Read write, okay, for the key, and then okay, so that looks to match up. They're talking about a home Ansible directory. I don't think I have that though. No, I don't. Okay, so we'll skip this for now and see if we need it. We may not need it, because I also don't see a Ansible user that was created. No, I don't. So we'll progress and see if we run into an issue here in a sec. So now what we'll need to do is jump onto our Agent 1 server and get the key and tell the Agent 1 server to allow the key of our Ansible guy, right? So we'll tell this guy, hey, when someone tries to SSH using this particular key, we're going to go ahead and allow them to log on, and that's within so there should be a /.ssh. Well, actually, let me install OpenSSH. And okay, so we already have that, so that's good. So now there should be a .ssh server, or sorry, directory. Let me run a find for that, because it doesn't look like it's in the same structure. Okay, so our authorized key file does not exist, so let's go ahead and create that. So within this home directory, I'll just make a directory .ssh. I'll change the permissions to that, and now I will create this authorized key file under the .ssh directory. Change the ownership of that. Then it wants us to check the permissions. I'm logged in as the root user, so that should be fine. Okay, that looks good. And now we need to copy the public key that we created on our Ansible server and add it to the authorized key file of our CentOS server, right? So looks like we can run a cat command and push this over to the authorized key file, right? So if I cd into this, if I look at authorized keys, oh, damn it. Taylor 1, Linux 1. So looks like we're tied up for today on the Battle of Nano. If you've seen my previous videos, you know how often I forget to install it before trying to run it. And we need to make a few modifications. We need to change the IP address, and also change the user to root instead of CentOS. Now it should ask for the authenticity can't be no such file. Oh, let me back out, or let me back up one directory. Okay, here we go. Now it's asking, do you want to log in? Yes, it's asking for the password. And so now, so what just happened was we were catting out the value of our public key, right, which is stored within this rsa.pub, right? So this guy here. We were then echoing it into, well, cat to append what we catted out, so our public key, to the .ssh authorized keys file on this server, which is agent 1. And I had to change the user that Wazuh uses to the root user, because that's what I have. Maybe in your environment you have like a operations user or something like that that's generic, or you yourself have access to the server, so you replace it with your username, and then point, of course, to the right IP address. So now we should be able to open this authorized keys file, and there we go. We have our public key uploaded to our agent 1 server, right? So now what we should be able to do is log on to this server without having to enter a password, right? We just use our SSH key. But let's also make sure that our agent 1 server allows for that to be done. So if we go into SSH, we have the SSHD config file. You can see that they point out in their documentation, pub key authentication needs to be set to yes, and we need to point to our authorized key file. So let's make sure that that's already done. So let's go ahead and search for pub key. Okay, so that's actually set to no, so let's uncomment that and set it to yes. Unless by default it's set to yes. Maybe by default it's set to yes, I'm not totally sure. But I'll uncomment it just to make sure. And then let's look for this authorized keys file. Here we go, right here. So that's already set to what we want, okay. So let's go ahead and restart this SSHD service. I'll probably lose my session. Oh, I don't? Okay, cool. So let's make sure that's still running. Okay, that looks good. And now from my Ansible server, just to verify that this should work, should be able to SSH root at, give the IP address, and we then should immediately log in. And there we go. So we immediately logged in without having to enter a password, right? So if I were to duplicate this section, try to log in as root, it asked me for a password. But now from this Ansible server, I can SSH directly on, and I'm in. So if I do a who am I log on to the root server on agent 1, right? So we have this agentless, we have this remote connection that we can do without having to manually enter in a password, which will allow Ansible to log in to our agent 1, agent 2, etc. servers, and actually give them Ansible the ability to run the required playbook, the Wazuh playbook, that we will instruct it to do here in a second. So we'll also need to add, do these similar steps to agent 2, right? So agent 1 is looking good, and let's go ahead and do this on agent 2. So we'll need to, sorry for the background noise, the garbage truck is here and is very loud at my apartment. Actually, I'll wait until they're gone and just skip ahead via the magical powers of editing. And this will give me an opportunity to get some more coffee, so it all works out. Alright guys, sorry about that. The garbage truck is gone, so hopefully I won't have that loud background noise. So we left off with needing to add the public key of our Ansible server onto our agent 2. So we'll follow the same steps. I don't think this .ssh directory exists, and it doesn't, so go ahead and make a directory .ssh and change the permissions of this guy again. Right, so, and now let's also create the authorized keys file and change the permission of this guy. And let's just verify that all looks good, okay. And now we'll also use, oh, let me get out of that and back onto the Ansible server. Now we'll also use that same cat command to append our public key to the authorized key file of our agent 2. So let me go ahead and grab this IP address, 247. Okay, it's just a .232. Let's say yes. give password. And now that should be copied over. So if I cd into SSH and look at the authorized keys file, okay, good. We now have it. And let's see, and now we need to change the config file for this guy. SSHD config. Let me actually see if, so this is commented out. Let me see if it's yes by default actually. And we can just test that by trying to log on. So SSH root 232. Okay, so it is yes by default, so good. So but by default, we actually don't need to edit this sshd_config file. As you can see, I've remotely logged on to agent 2 without having to enter a password. So great. So, you know, some of you guys are probably saying, well, you're having to manually log on to agent 1 and agent 2 to upload the SSH key. And that's true. I don't really know a way around that, unfortunately. So if any of you guys have another solution, let me know in the comments. But what I would highly suggest is, you know, as part of your server kickstart process, right? So as you're deploying a new server into the environment, you make sure that the authorized keys file is created and has this public key, right? So you can build that into whatever solution you're using to stand up your VMs, or if you're, you know, running physical servers, you can embed this as part of the whatever scripts or tool that you're using to currently deploy your new servers. You can make sure that all new future servers will have the public key of the Ansible server in its authorized keys file, right? So you may have to play some catch up, unfortunately, in terms of getting the Ansible's authorized keys, the Ansible's public key, a part of the authorized key files on all your servers. And that may be something that you just can't avoid. You'll unfortunately have to take some time to do that. But you can make sure that new servers that are being spun up have the public key of the Ansible server in the authorized keys file. So that way you won't have to do this catch-up process again, right? And you will be able to manage your Wazuh agents from the Ansible server, or from one location forever, without having to manually log on to the agents, or without manually having to log on to the other servers themselves, right? So there may unfortunately be some manual work that'll be required. Maybe your ops team already has a solution in place to where they can automatically upload or append to the authorized keys file. You know, every environment and every team is going to run it differently, but if they do have a solution to where they could append to this file, you could just give them the public key of your Ansible server and say, hey, add this to the file so I can, you know, remotely authenticate, and I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z of trying to deploy a Wazuh agent onto this guy. But I'll stop rambling on about that. Let's get back into it. So we have the authorized keys files created. The Ansible server can log on to both. And so now let's go ahead and configure Ansible itself. So we'll have this etc Ansible host file. So let's go ahead and jump into here. And they have some examples, and Wazuh is also giving us some examples as well. But what we'll do is we'll add the IP address of our agent 1 and agent 2, and we'll also specify a user of whatever username you use to copy the file over, or copy the public key over, right? So we use root in our case. If you have like a DC Ops admin, or you know, your own user account is able to add to the authorized keys file, then you would use whatever you need to use, whatever username that is. In our case, it is root for this demo. So I can go ahead and copy this, and I'll just add it to the end of this file because all this other stuff is commented out. I will change this to root as the user that'll be used. And you'll need to make sure whatever user account this is using has, at least sudo permission to do a yum install, right? Because, whatever distribution of Linux or Windows that you're using. Well, in this example, we're doing Linux. I'll do Windows in the next video. So whatever distribution you'll need, whether it's Debian, so if you need to use like an apt-get, right? For CentOS, which will be our example, you'll run a yum install. So you'll need to make sure whatever user account you're using has the ability to do that on the box. And now let's grab the IP address. So we had a .236, then a .232. So I'll go ahead and just copy this. And user was the same, so .232. There we go. And save that off. All right. On some system, I made a problem with the Python interpreter. Okay, that should be fine. Okay, now let's attempt a connection with the remote host using ping. Okay, so this will just run a simple test. And let's see what we get back. We should get these back. And okay, looks good. So success to .236, which is our agent 1. And then we had a success to .232. Okay, so that looks good so far. Now we'll need to do the Ansible playbook. So Wazuh has this in their repo. So if we actually go ahead and get into their repo here. Oh, okay, that's fine. So Wazuh actually hosts this in their repo. So we'll go ahead and grab that. We'll navigate to our roles directory. Let's make sure our branch, though, of our manager. So we'll need to match our manager version, right? So if we do etc, I think it's osec, -int.conf. So if we cat out this file, we'll see our version is 4.0.4. So I'll go ahead and change this branch to 4.0.4. Just so it matches the version that my manager is. So okay, that looks good. Okay, so we have our Wazuh Ansible, and now let's go ahead and configure the playbook for the agent. So you can also use Ansible to deploy a Wazuh manager and Elasticsearch service, but we're not worried about that in this demo. We're worried about, we already have our manager and Elasticsearch servers and software up and running, and we've already automated that process in the last few videos. So if you haven't checked those out, go ahead and check those out. And now let's go ahead and see if we can run this. So we access the directory, we've cloned the repo. Okay, so I'll go ahead and cd into this Wazuh Ansible directory, and we should have a playbook. Yep. So let's go ahead and check this out, because I actually haven't checked this out. So I'm sure there's some changes we'll need to make. We can see the roles that we have. So let's actually back up. We can do a yum install tree. Okay, let me install that, and let's try that again so we can tree out everything. Okay, so we can see the roles that we have. Okay, so we have Elasticstack. So that is grabbing the Elasticsearch software. Okay, the open distro of Elasticsearch. And then we have our Wazuh. Okay, we have our Ansible Wazuh-Agent, which is what we are interested in doing. So that all looks good. We can see the pre-configured playbooks that we have. So if we do that, we see our Wazuh-Agent.yaml file here. And I'm assuming this is what we will look to update. In this occasion, we're going to use the role of Wazuh Agent. Okay, to consult the default, go here. If you want to change the default configuration, we can change the, okay, blah, 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 file directly. We can create another YAML file. We like to do this. Okay, let's see below. Okay, so we can look at our roles. Let's see what this guy looks like. Oh, okay, so this is really getting into the fine-tuning of where you're grabbing the Wazuh-Agent repo from. Okay, so you could change your default stuff all in here. So you could point to your manager, IP address, if you're using a different port or protocol. Okay, so all of your kind of fine-tuned settings can be made within this default /main.yaml file. So that's good to know. So maybe, for example, if the repo, right, like maybe your internal servers don't have access outbound to the internet to grab the packages from, you know, where Wazuh's hosting them on the internet. Maybe you transfer them to a like a internal repo server that you're using, so that internal servers can only grab packages from that server and not anything out on the internet. You know, you could change that here to whatever your internal repo server is. So, but that's just one example. It looks like you can fine tune a lot of different variables that are out of scope for this demo. So that's good to know. But what we're curious about doing is going to the Wazuh-Agent.yaml file that's within the playbooks directory. So if I pwd that out, Wazuh Ansible /playbooks. So let's go ahead and go into this directory, and we have a few changes we'll need to make. So here it's asking for the host. Can we add multiple hosts to this? I would assume we could. Maybe it's just comma separated, or we could do a quick Google search. Add multiple hosts to Ansible. Okay, so we can do either do a colon or we can do a comma separated. So okay, so let's go ahead and try that and make sure that works. So we'll add our agent 1 and agent 2. So I had a .236 and then a .232. Of course, this would be, you know, the IP address of whatever servers you're using. I wonder if you could do like a subnet. Or you can say all host. Oh, how would it know though? Maybe you could specify that in a different. Oh, wait, no, we've already added our hosts, right? Yeah, we already did add our hosts. Okay, so I could just say all hosts, right? Because we already have them in the. We already have them in our Ansible file. Yeah, we already have them in our etc Ansible host file. So we have those two guys there. Okay, yeah, so we can use the all hosts, or so we could just do a wildcard. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that and see if that works. So I would assume that would read our Ansible host file and just add them all there. So that's good. So that's good. So now we have a common place of where we can store all of our host files. Okay, so that's good. Let's go back into here. So now we need to also point it to our Wazuh manager, which is, you can get, well, I have my Wazuh manager server here. We do a config on this guy. We will point him here. Oh, okay, here we go. API protocol. I don't know if we need the, I don't think we need the API stuff. Okay, let's see what they say. The first line host, the roles, indicates the roles that will be executed. Okay, so the role, yeah, we're looking to run the Ansible Wazuh agent. And we need the auth-d. So they don't, it's not provided in here, but that's fine. but we can set a ton of these variables that we want to run, right? So we'll have the auth service, the registration. So as you guys should be familiar by now, the Wazuh agent will send all of its logs on port 1514, but in order to authenticate with the Wazuh manager, that's done on port 1515, right? And you can configure SSL certs if you want to verify, use those during the authentication process. We're not doing that as of now, so that's fine. And I don't think we don't need these API variables here, because that's only used from Kibana to our Wazuh manager, which Kibana, as you guys know, is our web UI. So that isn't needed in this case. Okay, so this all looks good. And now we need to run the playbook. Okay, so we use the -B option to indicate that we are going to become a super user. Okay, we use the -K option to indicate Ansible to ask for the password. What would the opting to enter the password when Ansible requests it? Something operation before we'll need sudo. We can solve this in several ways. Opting to enter the password, then Ansible requests it to contemplate other option. Oh, okay. So we can tell. So the Ansible will try to run a sudo command, right, on the agent. The agent will say, "What's the password?" And we can use this -K to do so. And this demo, I'm sure I won't need it because I'm logging in as the root user. So let's go ahead and kick this off and see what happens. Become password. Okay. Enter that. Error while loading YAML. Did not find expected alphabetic or numeric character. Line 2, column 11. Oh, is it complaining about the... Okay, let me try... So, a wildcard, let me try all. Maybe it doesn't like that. Okay, and it's asking for the root password, and I'm giving it. Okay, that looks better. Okay. Looks like it's running through some tasks here. Installing Wazuh-Agent. Okay, it looks like it did it on agent 1. Now it looks like it's doing it on agent 2. And what's nice too is it also identifies the Linux distribution that's running. So that's nice. I don't have to specify what particular, if it's CentOS or Debian or whatever the case may be. Okay, so it looks like this came back good. So .232.236. If I jump onto these guys, let's see if we have a Wazuh-Agent process running. Okay, we do, and it's running. Let me tail and make sure it's connected to the manager. Okay, that looks good. Oh, maybe we'll get lucky and I won't have to debug too much, which doesn't happen often. Okay, let's refresh the web UI. Let's see if we see these guys. And sure enough, we do. So we have agent 1 and agent 2. Very cool. And you can see there were different versions of CentOS. I could have added a Debian or Ubuntu box in here as well. I just didn't. All right, and we can see all the tasks that it ran through. So I guess if something failed, we would know exactly what failed. And really the only change we had to make was changing this to all instead of the wildcard, so that hurt us. And then we removed the API variables that they have here. I don't know why they include those. That's definitely not needed. But we could also alter a lot of other variables as well. So maybe if you want to assign these guys to a particular group on install, I'm sure we could do that as well, which maybe in like let me keep going through the documentation. And we can also add much more variables if we want to, right? So these variables here are very basic, right, and are required just for basic communication and installation. But if we go down to the, let's see, that's Wazuh Manager. So if you're using Ansible to deploy a manager, you can set all these variables. In our case, let's try to find agent. Oh, and darn it, I hate when I do that. I get so used to using Nano and do a Control W to find, and within Chrome, I guess that's a hotkey to delete my tab. So let me go back into the documentation here, go into variables, Control F, there we go. Search for agent. You can see there's a ton of, I don't know where it's finding it though. There's a ton of hits. I might just have to manually scroll down. Manager, here we go, agent. So we could point the agent to multiple managers. So we could use one for registration and one to send alerts to. You could also, replace this with a domain name if you're doing that, which I would recommend, just so you can have some failover capabilities. If you want to use a cert, if you want to use a particular repo, okay, so you could point that there. You could assign it to a specific group automatically. So if you see these guys are set just to the default group where my mouse is hovering here, we could, say you had a Linux or a CentOS group that you had different file exclusions on and things like that. You could assign your host to that particular group during the install process, right? So there's a ton of variables that you can set, and you can get as sophisticated with it as you want, really. You can even add stuff to the .yaml file of the agents themselves. So that's really cool. So you can really get in depth with all this. I didn't know you could actually do that. So that's really cool. And you can specify what particular files you want to monitor. So maybe you have a abnormal location of where you're writing like the secure logs out to. Maybe it's just like var secure log instead of var log secure. You could set that within the variables. Depending on what type of distribution Ansible dictates that it would add that in appropriately. So that's really cool. So this tool is really powerful, and I highly recommend, especially as your environment gets bigger and bigger. You want to have a central location of where you can deploy these, right, and get these rolling out, so you don't have to play catch up all the time. So, and Ansible is also free, as the name suggests. Open secure. We only demo open source tools that you guys can implement for free. And I appreciate you guys hanging out with me in this video. And in the next video, we will run Ansible, but on a Windows agent. So we will also go into in depth of running Ansible against a Windows host, and I will see you guys there. And as always, let me know what you liked or disliked about the video, any errors I may have made, or recommendations for other open source tools that we all should explore.